Hello everyone, my name is Marketa Hanchova and today we'll speak about Giacomo Rossini and his Il Barbiere di Sevilla, also known as the Barber of Seville. Who was Giacomo Rossini? He was born in 1792, so he was living in Romanticism, and he comes from Pesaro, a beautiful, charming city in Italy. And if you travel to the city, you will be reminded of Rossini on every corner. Not only Teatro Rossini is there, not only a beautiful, very impressive statue, but every corner has a little reminder of the characters from his opera or moments from his life. And the city is so proud of him, the biggest and most passionate and most effective ambassador of Rossini's music. And even though Rossini moved out when he was 10 years old, he would come back the whole life. And when he died, and he died as a very rich man in 1868, he left majority of his large estate. His estate is worth, for today's money, over $1 million. He left it to Pesaro and they established a conservatory in Rossini's name. There is a Rossini Opera Festival and it is really Mecca of Rossini music. So he was born there. He was the only son of Anna, who was seamstress but also very able singer, and she actually made out of her talent also 10-year-long singing career in opera. And his father, very colorful character, and I think Giacomo took after him, who was an excellent musician. He was a trumpeter in the local orchestra, and he was very politically involved, and here and there he was thrown in jail for his political opinions, but very loving, and he gave Giacomo the basis. He taught him to play several instruments. When he was 10, as I mentioned, he moved to Luga, which is close to Ravenna, and there he met a wonderful gentleman at the local school. He was priest, his name was Malherbe, and he had very extensive musical library, and that included Mozart and Haydn. And you would say, Mozart and Haydn, but of course, but not at that time in Italy. Mozart and Haydn was not such a common name, household name, I wanted to say, as today. And Rossini absolutely fell in love with classicism. And later, when he was in Vienna, he went to see Eroica by Beethoven and also equally loved Beethoven, and he also met with him. So those three guys representing classicism were truly heroes of Rossini. He then went to Bologna, that has amazing Liceo Musicale, where he would study about 2.5 years from the time he was 14 to almost 17 years old. And the first musical successes are right there. When he was 12, he wrote the first 6 sonatas, very much in the name of Mozart and Haydn style. And then when he's 14, he's writing his very first opera, Demetrius I Publius. But the very first official opera, with apt name, The Champion of Marriage, was produced in Venice in 1810. And that's a beginning of absolutely amazing career for Rossini, who would write from 1810 to 1829 39 operas. And I will actually take you to the premiere of the last opera, which was William Tell. It premiered in Paris, where Rossini moved, and he wrote several opera for French audience. Was not easy to convince French that Italian can write well French operas, which were quite different to the Italian operas. They were very epic, they included ballet, they had usually very epic synopsis, but he succeeded. His William Tell with the famous overture was quite successful. And after the opera, which happened the 3rd of August, actually after the premiere, I wanted to say, 3rd of August of 1829, he came out and he said, Madame et Monsieur, I would like to thank you that you came to see my opera. I want to thank you that you accepted it with such a passion. And I would like to announce that I am retiring. I paid my dues I wrote 39 operas, and after all, I am 37 years old. And guess what? He stood his ground, and he truly entered chapter of leisure, chapter of idling, chapter of entertaining people, chapter of writing just tiny bit, and chapter of cooking and looking very respective to his cooking. And today, when you go to Paris, many restaurants would feature a meal which is called à la Rossini. And it's not a marketing gimmick. This will be really Rossini's recipe. But let's just go really quickly through his life. So first, he is in Italy, of course, and a great success come in 1815 when he's 23, and he is getting a music directorship in San Carlo Opera in Naples, which was one of the most respected opera house. Today, it is the oldest still running opera house in the world, and between 1815 to 1823, so 7.5 years or so, he wrote 18 operas, 9 for the San Carlos in Naples and 9 wherever he would have commissions. Just absolutely amazing. And in this bunch of the 18 operas is nested our Barber of Seville. But let me first tell you what kind of operas Rossini wrote. So at that time, 2 operas, we had 2 categories of operas. Opera seria, very serious, with very serious and usually very complicated synopsis, usually from history or from mythology. And then opera buffa, a fun opera that Barber of Seville belongs to. And except that, he lives in a time where we put a category, a label called bel canto. And many times people believe that bel canto is the name of the techniques, but the techniques is really called coloratura, but nothing wrong with calling it bel canto. But I always understand that the bel canto is really a label for a time span from about 1800 to about 1840, 1845. So what is bel canto? Bel canto is a beautiful singing if we translate it, but what it is, coloratura, the techniques that is characterized by bel canto, is showing off the human voice in the utmost capability. So you are pushing the limits of our anatomy to the utmost possibility, as I mentioned. And I always feel that just like we go to Olympic Games and we are astonished by the athletes, what they can do, how far they can push themselves, and how beautifully their muscles are working for the speed and anything else. It's the same with bel canto. We are astonished what we can do, that we can sing 27 notes within one syllable, and we can go big range, and we can do all kinds of glissandos and all kinds of thrills. And so bel canto, coloratura, is a showcase of what we can do. And when I say it lasted, it was very much present in the first 19th century. Does it mean it went away? Absolutely not. But in that time, it was something that was in fashion, it was the style, and it was the inspiration for anything later where we would like to show off the voice. So that's where Barber of Seville belong. It's opera buffa, and it features bel canto. And I just very quickly tell you a couple milestones of Rossini life, and then we will go to Barber of Seville. So he is very successful in Italy, and then he decides to go to Vienna for a little bit. Here he meets Beethoven, sees Eroica, and in Vienna there is a fever of Rossini. Rossini. He is, wherever he goes, he is so passionately welcomed, and people love his operas, and he just feels so good because he did not expect it. Then he goes to London, also very much enjoys the stay there, and then he decided to go to Paris. But he just didn't go and try to look for a job, but he actually arranged it that he will work for Louis XVIII. And he did. When he came, Louis XVIII died. Nevertheless, he was able to arrange commissions, and actually he then eventually will get a annual pension from French government. So he lives in Paris, and this is where the William Tell comes in 1829, as I mentioned, his very last opera. And then what he will do, except idling, he did something very important for artists, which is salons. He got married in 1822 to a wonderful singer from San Carlo Opera in Naples, Isabella Calbran. They unfortunately stayed together only about 10 years. But they have a beautiful apartment in Paris, and they open the doors for all the musicians and painters and poets and philosophers and politicians. And you would come in and people would share their art, their opinion, their philosophy, their religion. And it was a wonderful, wonderful occasion that so much was written about. And also Rossini was very, very generous man. So he lives in France. His mother dies, to whom he was very close, who of course lives in Italy. So then he decided to, about after 12 years spending in France, he goes back to Italy, and he lives in Bologna, he lives in Florence, and then his health is declining, and France has better medical care than Italy, so he decided to go in the mid-50s back to France, and he spent there the last about 12 years, and he died in 1868, close to Paris. And he was buried in Père Lachaise, the famous cemetery for famous people. And then the Italian government felt that he really belongs to Italy. So in 1880, they moved him, and he's today in Florence in Santa Croce. So that's in a nutshell his life. I will just say one anecdote. There are so many anecdotes, but one thing, he became rich because of his talent and also because of his mastery of negotiation. For example, he would turn in opera and he would not turn in the overture. And the impresario would come and say, "Rossini, you forgot to give me an overture." And Rossini would say, "Oh, you wanted overture?" I mean, there was not such a thing, opera without overture. And of course, the impresario is getting mad because the premiere should be in 2 weeks or 1 week or 3 days. And Rossini said, "Oh, if you really insist on the overture, I will need to charge you more." Of course, to a great anger of the impresario. So he was trying all kinds of things, but where he also got his money. And this is what you may not know, that the foyers of the opera were in many, many cases gambling houses. And you did not play only cards, but you could gamble all kinds of, in all kinds of way. And you could also price anything you wanted, not just money, but goat and horse. So you would see in front of opera all kinds of items. Anyway, so what he would do, he would come to an opera house and he would rent 2 tables. And the impresario said, "What you want to do with it?" "Well, it's none of your business. Are you going to rent it to me?" He said, "Yes." And then he would rent it, Rossini would rent it to a card players, and he would take percentage of the winnings. So all kinds of things he would do, but a very generous man, as I mentioned, and fun, very humorous, and very dynamic. Everybody really loved him. So now to the opera Barber of Seville. It premiered in February of 1816 in Teatro Argentina, that was owned by Sforza Cesarina, who was a great impresario, but very nervous whenever Rossini was commissioned. He loved his work and he knows it will be a success, but it was always, everything was last minute. And Sforza unfortunately died as a young man only 4 days before the premiere, but the premiere was actually not a success, and I will tell you why. So Barber of Seville is based upon a wonderful play which came out in 1775, and it is by a French playwright, Beaumarchais. Beaumarchais, that should be a talk on its own because he has such a colorful life, but I will tell you just two things. Number one, that he was absolutely amazing playwright. He caught eye of Louis XV and then Louis XVI. He worked at the court, and he wrote a trilogy. He wrote Barber of Seville, 1775. About 8 years later, he wrote Marriage of Figaro. Sounds familiar, opera by Mozart. And then he wrote Mother Guilty, which is also opera, actually 3 operas by 3 different composers. In America, we have opera by John Corigliano called Ghost of Versailles. So it's a trilogy of plays that were extremely successful, but also extremely controversial because all of the plays are showing how aristocracy is corrupted in their ethics, in their morals, and showing how the servants can sometimes outwit the aristocrats. So it's very social, very much in a social critique style, and that's why it was censored, it was banned, it was again allowed to play, then it was banned again, etc. So that's one of the great things about Beaumarchais, that he was very excellent writer, very eloquent. And then the other thing was that he loved America. He loved the philosophy of French Revolution, and he felt when the American Revolution started that that's actually something that he embraces. And then, of course, the ideals of American Revolution carried into the French Revolution. And he wanted to help Americans. So what he did, he was trying to convince the French government to help Americans. And long story short, and as I said, it calls for a talk on its own. He invested his own money, and also he collected lots of money and sent a great provision in 3 huge ships to America. The provision came right before the Battle of Saratoga, one of the most important decisive battle that led to the win of American Revolution. And many people think that if it wasn't for Beaumarchais' gift, then perhaps things would be different. Isn't it interesting? From Barber of Seville and Marriage of Figaro all the way to American Revolution. So anyway, so that was Beaumarchais who wrote the play upon which the opera is based. And what the opera is about? The opera is about Figaro, of course, Figaro. By the way, Barber of Seville is so popular that the famous and very distinguished today newspaper in France called Figaro, that was established 1826 as kind of like a gossipy, very sardonic newspaper, then in 1866 became a daily, very distinguished newspaper, and it was named after Figaro. So anyway, Barber of Seville is about Figaro, who is the barber. And the opera opens when he comes to Seville, and he sings a beautiful aria, Largo ad factotum, where he says, hey, people of Seville, now you can relax. You can enjoy life, because whatever problem you may have, I will resolve it. You need new hairdo? Of course, you come to me. You need to shave? Of course, you come to me. Oh, your toothache? Come to me, I pull it out. You need pedicure? Come to me. You need new beautiful dress? Come to me, I can sew it for you. Oh, you need to get rid of that boyfriend of yours? Come to me. You are looking for a new girlfriend? Come to me. So whatever it was, you come to Barber of Seville. And the opera is about Count Almaviva, who will be a character just like Figaro just like other characters in Marriage of Figaro and the last opera, Mother the Guilty. So Count Almaviva comes to Figaro, the barber, and says, I like this young woman, but she lives with Dr. Bartolomeo, and I know he thinks he will marry her, even though he's her benefactor. And so I don't know if you can do something about it. And Figaro says, oh my God, I never had easier task. In couple weeks, Rosina is yours. And so the opera is about Figaro and Count Almaviva, how they try to get Rosina fall in love with Count Almaviva and how they can get married. Will they get married? Will it succeed? Well, you need to see the opera for that. So, I prepared for you some wonderful excerpts. First, you will see several production of the opening wonderful, wonderful aria, Largo ad factotum. And then you will see Rosina, who is expressing that she actually is falling in love with Count Almaviva, who is disguised as a poor student. So you will see the excerpt, so I hope you will enjoy it. And the opera premiere, as I mentioned, was in February 1816 in Rome, and it was disaster. And now I can tell you why. Because Barber of Seville was produced in 1782 in Russia by a very, very revered composer, Giovanni Paisiello. And Paisiello was still alive. He was 75 years old. He had a huge following. By the way, Mozart loved Paisiello music. He mentioned him in 2 or 3 letters, how much he enjoyed his music. And I only say it because Mozart did not praise many, many people. Anyway, so Paisiello is still alive. His Barber of Seville is in repertoire everywhere. People love it. Based upon Barber of Seville by Beaumarchais, so the same story. And everybody say, Rossini, you are crazy if you want to do that. Rossini is young and he has great ideals. He's great confidence. He said, I can do that. So anyway, now when we have the premiere, who do you think buys the most tickets? Of course, the clique and the followers of Paisiello. Not only they come to boo, not only they brought rotten tomatoes and rotten eggs to throw on the stage, but they bring big burlap bags with wild cats. And you can imagine what happened. When the prima donna is in his wonderful, wonderful aria, all of a sudden 3 screeching cats are all around her and she doesn't know what to do. The audience doesn't know if it belongs to the opera or not. What can I tell you? It was disaster. But Rossini decided to go on. So as it was custom, you would rehearse the opera when you wrote it, then you have to conduct 2 or 3 or 4 performances. What can you do? Rossini came next day, it was much better. 3rd day, it was even better. 4th day, it became a hit. And today, how many of us heard of Paisiello and how many people know Rossini's Barber of Seville? But I want to tell you that the opera Barber of Seville by Paisiello is actually a beautiful one. It's just different. It's very much in the classical style, while Rossini's is, Rossini, fun, dynamic, showing mischievous side of him and things like that. Was it success after all? Absolutely. It showed in New York City in 1819, 3 years after the premiere in English. Then it showed in New Orleans, 1823 in French. And then it showed in May of 1825 in New York City in Italian. And it was the very first Italian opera shown in America in Italian. So, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you learned something. I hope that you will especially enjoy the wonderful excerpts I prepared for you. And I hope I will see you again. Thank you very much. Enjoy.